welcome to a very, very special episode of Neurotransmissions, Max Planck Florida's Neurotransmissions / our annual career panel. My name's Misha. My co-host today is Ilaria Drago. Hi, Ilaria.
Hi, Misha. Thank you so much for partnering with the Education Outreach Department. As you already said, this year the circumstances are changed, but this is not stopping us from having our annual career panel. We just had to adjust a little bit. And so we decided to do this special podcast episode. So I want to start by thanking all the Max Planck scientists that agreed to be with us today. Thank you so much. And also thanks to all the audience that already sent some questions that we are going to ask during the panel. So to start, I would like to ask everyone to introduce themselves, starting from Sarah.
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. This is really exciting. So I'm Sarah Stern, and I am going to be starting my lab at MPFI as a research group leader in January. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. So I've lived in New York basically my whole life. I went to a really small high school, and then I went to NYU for college, where I originally majored in psychology and eventually got interested in neuroscience and started doing research there. And from there, I went on to get my PhD at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, where I studied molecular mechanisms underlying long-term memory formation and storage, so a very popular topic. And after that, I went on to do a postdoctoral fellowship with Jeffrey Friedman at the Rockefeller University. He is well known for discovering the hormone leptin, which controls appetite. And I there was studying how environmental influences on appetite occur at a biological level. And that's the work that I hope to continue in my own laboratory with an additional focus on eating disorders like anorexia nervosa. So I'm very excited about this.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So next we have Anant. Anant is a postdoc who worked with me for some time before I stopped being a postdoc in the same lab. So Anant, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be on this podcast. I'm Anant Jain. I'm originally from India, and I'm currently a postdoc, as Misha mentioned, in Dr. Rohey Yasuda's lab. I completed my PhD in neuroscience from Northwestern University in Chicago. So it is a pleasant change coming from a windy city to a city with 12 months of sun. I got fascinated in neuroscience when I was doing brain research on my computer on the beaches of Okinawa in Japan as a part of my research internship. I love to understand how neurons communicate, and I'm intrigued with the observation that neuronal connections can change with experience. In Rohey's lab, I'm specifically looking into the cellular mechanisms of spatial memory, or how do we spatially navigate in different environments. And outside lab, I like to spend some time cooking new dishes and enjoy playing table tennis and cricket. Really excited to be here.
Thank you, Anna. Next up, Medina. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, happy to be here. Hi guys, I'm Medina Sarvastani. I'm also a postdoc at the Institute. I'm from Iran, but I've been in this country studying for school for 20 years now. And I originally wanted to be an astronaut. So I went to undergrad for engineering, and somehow along the way, I read a book. It was a textbook, and I got into neuroscience, and I realized that the universe in the brain is cooler than the universe out there, sort of. So I switched to neuroscience. Slowly, I got my PhD in engineering, but sort of along the way, did a little bit more neuroscience. And now I study the visual system. And I think that I have now really found the right kind of scale of study that interests me, and the right kind of analysis. So my day-to-day has been pretty exciting at the Institute.
So what's harder, the space or the brain?
The brain, come on.
Yeah.
They're both hard. The brain has a lot of, they're both hard, and they're both really high dimensional. So it's hard to even know what we don't know. And they're both hard to observe. So it's hard to know what we can't see.
All right. And so thank you, Medina. Our last panelist is Eric Washburn. Eric, why don't you tell us all about yourself?
All right. Hello. Thanks for having me on the panel. I'm Eric Washburn. I'm the manager of the Environmental Health and Safety Program here at Max Planck. I administer the various safety programs, among other things. A little bit of background about my career. I started off in neuroscience back in the early 2000s at the Neuroscience Institute in Portland, Oregon. I was a lab tech in Dr. John Walsh's lab, where I learned about ischemia in the brain. I started making viral particles when viral particles weren't in vogue, I guess, for use in some of the experiments that were going on in the lab. I liked the lab life, so it's really involved and time consuming, of course, but you learn a lot, you ask a lot of new questions. And there we learned how to implement this viral technology into the various experiments that were ongoing in the lab. And because it was a new technology, I was kind of, I guess, forced to work closely with the biosafety committees and animal care and use facilities there. So that's kind of how I got my start in safety. I also got really good at making these viral particles. So I started a viral core at the Oregon Health and Sciences University, where I was making viral particles for many, many labs inside the institute, as well as, I went international as well, so selling viral particles to Canadian labs. So in about 2012, I moved down to South Florida, mainly because I got tired of the rain in Portland, Oregon. I just couldn't take it anymore. So I started off in the Taniguchi lab, and we were studying inhibitory inputs onto excitatory neurons. And then about 4 years ago, I made the jump to environmental health and safety. I thought it was a nice jump because I'd been working closely with, safety programs in these other institutes. So, back to the beginning, I administer the safety programs here to make sure that we all practice safe science and of course, definitely for the scientists, but we have more than scientists here at the Institute. So just to make sure everybody works safely, and also that we stay in compliance with various regulatory agencies, local, state, federal, so we don't get in any trouble at that level. Other things that I do here is I administer all of the DEA controlled substances. We coordinate the Institutional Biosafety Committee, and we work closely with the scientists, the new scientist, Sarah, to assist with arrival and ongoing needs to ensure that the research programs are implemented and run efficiently and safely.
All right. I should have told you earlier, leave the detail for the questions, but thank you very much, Eric.
Okay, well, you can edit that out. That's fine.
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
Can I add that? I just want to add that an important part of Eric's job for me is that he allows us to play with fire hydrants, I think annually. So I appreciate
those are fire extinguishers. So apparently,
what's a hydrant?
Oh, yeah. So
okay, fire.
So clearly, the playing does not translate into knowledge.
Fire extinguishers, right? Remind me later which one's which. I'll come find you.
Okay.
So the kind of format that we wanted to bring to you, the audience, for this is we collected a certain amount of questions for our panelists to answer, to get you to sort of give you an idea of what their jobs are like, why they went into it, what their life is like while doing it, what they plan to do in the future, how they feel being in the scientific world as opposed to some sort of other career. To let you know, for those people who think, I don't want to be a scientist, I do want to be a scientist, I have absolutely no idea what a scientist is. We want to sort of give you an idea of, what the people living that life are like. So the questions we collected, there are a number of questions that we wrote ourselves based on information that we think might be helpful to you. And then we also collected questions from local schools in the area, and we'll be talking about those as well. So if we can just kind of start off, if you'd like to describe, like, what is your average workday, right? If you come in the morning, or, you know, for scientists, their schedules are weird. If you come in at the midnight, whenever your day starts, what is it like? What do you do? So let's start with, I think, Anant for that.
All right. Yeah. So although the pandemic has changed my work schedule a little bit, my average days when I'm doing experiments usually last for around 8 to 9 hours. I start my day by you know, checking and responding to some emails, and I start planning the day by making a to-do list. And I think that is kind of a favorite part of my day. When I make a to-do list, it can be, it can include the experiments that I'm planning to do, the solutions that I'm making, and it can be as small as backing up my data. And it is really rewarding to tick that off at the end of the task that I completed. And after making a to-do list, I usually then start preparing for my experiments, make solutions, calibrate the lasers, make slices from the brain. And I mainly do electrophysiology kind of experiments, which last for 4 to 5 hours. And so that's usually 2 to 3 times in a week. And on the days when I'm not doing experiments, I try to go back and look at the data that I collected during my experiment days and see whether it's interpretable. Try to do some analysis on that data, plot them for my colleagues and mentor. And also on my non-experiment days, I try to read some papers of the current research, neuroscience research that's happening around the world by reading articles from selected journals.
And so I feel like, you know, as scientists, we always say, like, we come in and we do experiments. This is like this nebulous thing that we say as part of our job. If you could sort of give like a little brief overview of what exactly does that come from, right? It's not just like some kind of assembly line where we have like a list of experiments that have to be done, right? Do these ideas come from someone else? Do these ideas come from you? How do you know what to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so so the experiments are really planned. We talk with our lab members. We discuss what things have been done. We make some preliminary observations, and based on the observations, we make some hypotheses, right? And we say that, okay, this is the best way to test this hypothesis. This is the best way to this is the best experiment to do to test this hypothesis. And then we plan the experiments way ahead of these experiments can be done, and this is the best way to address that problem that we incur to solve an issue or solve a puzzle. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sarah, how about you? Can you describe your average workday?
Yeah, I'm probably a lot less organized than you, Anand. The experiments that I do, I think, are a little bit maybe more long-term. So I sort of make more global plans, like maybe once a month I sit down and sort of plan, like, what do I have to get done in the next month? And so sort of every day I know generally what part of the experiment I have to do because they take a longer amount of time. And on a day-to-day basis, so I have 2 kids, so my schedule is perhaps more regimented than some other scientists. So I tend to get to the lab right after I drop my kids off at school, 8:30. And in science, you know, we have equipment, and that equipment is often in high demand. So, you know, if you can be in the lab at hours when other people are not there, it's usually a perk. So, you know, being like I mean, I'm not an early bird by nature, but now I'm forced to be. So that means I get equipment in the early hours. So typically I'll get in, I'll try to get some experiments done and get them out of the way before like everyone else in the lab trickles in. And what I love most about science is actually that, you know, every day is sort of different. Like we'll have seminars, so you're planning your experiments around someone coming to give a talk. And, you know, like Anand said, if we have downtime, I'll read some papers. And I just, you know, enjoy that flexibility to be doing something sort of different every day. Yeah.
So the novelty of it keeps driving you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and because I have kids and I am regimented also at the end of the day. So, you know, my work day ends at a specific time. And then I'd say, as you get in science, when you get along in your career, then you're also spending more time less on experiments and more on communicating your science to people. So I also tend to spend now a lot of my day writing proposals to fund my future experiments, and also preparing seminars to talk about those results, because, until we can communicate what we do in the lab with everyone else, it doesn't really make much impact.
So far, we spend a lot of time doing experiments, wet lab stuff, which is different day to day. We do a lot of reading and we do a lot of writing.
Yeah, I think Sarah made a very important point that this is not a 9-to-5 job. It is flexible, and it totally depends on whether the instrument that you're using is available. And you can spend hours in the lab, or you can just spend few you can spend some like less time. So it's very flexible. You don't have to be in the lab for a certain amount of time every day. So
yeah,
that's
minutes.
Another thing. That's few minutes. Yeah, just to take the data, and then you can analyze it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great part of being a scientist, even if when you have time points at night, that is not that fun. And so some of you already touched to the point that you say pre-pandemic, that is how my schedule looked like. So a question that I feel a lot of our audience would like to know is like, how does the pandemic has impacted your everyday work in the lab? So Eric, I feel that it was a big change for you, since now you are responsible on a bigger scale of the safety of all the scientists.
Eric Washburn turned into the Dr. Fauci of MPFI.
That's right. And before Corona virus, safety was kind of it was an easy job, right? All of your programs are already set up. You're just administering these programs, and kind of it's a sit and wait kind of situation. Of course, you go out to the labs and present safety topics, or discuss various ways to be safe and do your science. But then the coronavirus hit, and it was like a sledgehammer was dropped on my career. I mean, there were all kinds of new protocols to write. I became a professional sign maker to hang signs on doors all over the place, limiting the amount of people, telling them to wash their hands. And then, of course, we were learning all kinds of new things at the beginning, right, as far as the spread of the virus. So it seemed to change from week to week. It started off with contact was the primary way of spread, and then it's aerosols, and contact was not so important. So then I had to change up the signs a little bit. But it was very involved. I've been on more Zoom meetings with more committees that have been established since the beginning of this pandemic than I think I've ever been in my life. So it's gone from easy to stressful. Now it's back to easy because we've got all the programs set up.
Great. What about you, Medina? How is your everyday job changed since the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, I found out that I had to change my daily, weekly, monthly balance of how I divide my time. So like people already mentioned, at the same time, I'm writing, I'm thinking, I'm doing hands-on experiments that require me to be in lab next to my equipment. And the first few months, I couldn't be in lab next to my equipment. So I had to sort of shift my focus to thinking and writing. Teaching and sort of community aspects are also a big part of team science, neuroscience. So I did that a little bit. But for the past few months, I've been able to be back in lab, which is I'm so thankful for that, because I was sort of getting impatient at home. But I'm not as flexible. So we have to schedule these shifts so that there's not too many people in lab. So we all have to work together on this. And the flexibility of my science and my days was one of my favorite things. I could come in whenever I wanted to, I could leave whenever I wanted to, and that's gone now, but we're working around it. And it's working fairly well, but I just have to be, I'm already a very organized person. I have to be. During the pandemic, I found out that scheduling has to be my second job. So that's how you make it work.
Can I jump in and just say that one thing that COVID really showed me is, which I knew already, was how social science really is. You know, people have this perception that like scientists are not, it's not a social job, but so much of what we do is like informal conversations. You know, you do an experiment and you're like, wow, that was awesome. And, you know, you find your colleague who's sitting there and you talk about it and you come up with a new idea, and not having that is a big challenge and very different, and really made me see how social of a career it actually is.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of Max Planck collaboration happen at the coffee machine. Like people discuss, it's like, oh, can you do this experiment for me? And we can do this other thing. And a lot of paper were built at the coffee machine for sure at Max Planck. So that is a hard part for sure for scientists right now.
Yeah. And so if we could like sort of switch gears, right? So our audience, a lot of our audience right now is our high school students who might be curious about what it's like getting into science, getting into this sort of work. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what opportunities did you have, and did you do something when you were that age, when you say were like in late high school, early undergrad? Is there something you were doing that was putting you on your career into science? I'm going to ask Sarah first, because Sarah and I apparently crossed over a little bit, because I actually was at this in high school, was interning in a lab in NYU, where she went. So Sarah, what were you doing at that time?
Well, in high school, I was definitely doing nothing remotely related to science. And so I would say the biggest lesson to take from that is that if you're not interested in science right now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because I hated science. I actually took AP chemistry because I was told it would guarantee me that I would never have to take a science again in my life.
Oh,
But, you know, I guess I would say the only thing I did for my career was keep a very open mind. I went to college, you know, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I was interested in psychology, so I started taking those classes, and I just found that the only parts I ended up liking about them were the neuroscience parts, just because they were the only parts that seemed concrete to me, and I liked that. And then, you know, once I became interested in that, I started realizing that science in high school, when you're just given facts and you have to learn them, which was what I found really boring. I was like, I just don't want to learn like a list of formulas that are like meaningless to me, was not really the science that I was learning in college, which was actually about, you know, discovering things, which I guess I probably didn't have very good teachers in high school, but I just missed that component. And so once I became interested in that, I realized there's this thing called research that I didn't know existed. And I just decided to try to figure out what it was. And the other lesson I would say from that is that the first person that I approached to do research in their lab, you know, completely shut me down, said, oh, I only take students who are going to commit 2 years. And, you know, I didn't even know what research was. So how could I commit 2 years to that? So it took a few tries to find a lab that was willing to sort of take me on. And in the beginning, I was doing things that probably everyone in the lab thought was really boring. But for me, I found it just super exciting. You know, sort of the second I was in the lab, I was like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. It was just awesome to see people curious and like learning every day. And that was sort of what I loved about school all along, was, you know, being able to learn all the time. And science is just about constantly learning. So yeah, I would say keep an open mind about your interests, and, you know, don't be discouraged by people that are discouraging. At first.
And if you have peers that say they're already working in labs when they're in high school, that doesn't mean you're a failure. You can figure it all out once you are ready and into it.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right.
Medina, do you want to add something to it, or someone else do want to add a different? experience?
Sure. I mean, I think Sarah's advice was really spot on. Everyone has a different path, and at the end, it averages out. If you like science and you want to stay and you want to keep doing it, you'll find a way. You might zigzag, you might get lucky and go immediately to what you like. I definitely zigzagged. I did have a really wonderful undergraduate mentor, Dr. Liz Orwin. Now I get to call her Liz, who hired me to do a research project, like a summer internship with her. And there I realized that I like discovery. And I also realized that I just do not have the patience for sort of wet lab work in biology, and you have to boil this solution for 45 minutes at this temperature or everything goes wrong. So that sort of pushed me towards engineering, and I went to industry for a couple of years to try to figure out, you know, do I want to be an academic? If I like engineering, if I like the discovery process, I can probably do that in industry just as well. I ended up back in academia because I wanted to sort of build my knowledge base, figure out what the brain has to offer me, and as I got more interested in neuroscience. And again, a couple more paths and disciplines, different scales of measurement, different questions, and I'm now doing neuroscience, which requires lots of engineering, and it also requires patience, unfortunately. But as I've matured, I have that patience, and I recognize it's important to the experiment. So lots of zigzags, but if it's the right fit, you'll get there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if I can add, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And I feel that some kids are very happy I didn't become one, because I don't think I would have been a good one. And, but yeah, it's true that there are different paths to become a scientist, and you don't have to have everything figured out when you are in high school. Having said that, I can see from all of your experiences that it is important to try to get your hands dirty, like to see how it is to do real research, because it's really different from what you learn on the books. So it's very important, if you can, to see with your eyes. And so hopefully next summer, when the pandemic is gone, we are very optimistic. There are opportunities, if you are interested, to do some research at Max Planck for high schoolers. So keep your eyes open if you are interested in try to see how it is to do neuroscience research. We now have a question from our audience. Actually, I want to jump on this because I'm very curious to hear what the answer is. A kind of a hard question. So it is, how far along are we in the ability to regenerate new neurons, especially in the case of brain damaged patients? And I don't know if you know, but we have someone very qualified to answer this question, right, Misha?
That's sure. So yeah, I'm choosing to take this question. And I don't want to give grim answers. So the question basically is like, can we fix brain damage? And in that same category is how can we fix spinal cord injury? And it's a really tough question, and it certainly depends on a lot of things. So for my PhD, I worked on spinal cord regeneration and regeneration in the central nervous system, and I worked alongside of many people who are working in various diseases of the brain where there's neurodegeneration. So you may have heard of things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, things where brain cells die. And they're really, really tough. And why is it that like the brain is so bad at regenerating, right? So if you get a cut on your skin, you form some scar tissue and it closes up and it's really great. If you get a cut in your spinal cord, so that long thing that stretches down and between inside your vertebrae, it's the scarring that happens there is essentially much more destructive to your own system. And the way that the nervous system forms, it forms when you are in utero, before you're even born, and the environment that you sort of have for the central nervous system as an adult is very different than the developing nervous system, which means that all these signals to tell it how to regenerate are no longer there. That being said, there's a ton of really awesome research that is being done. So we can add various chemotropic factors. We can do, people are working with genetic editing techniques. There's a lot of stem cell research work, research into creating stem cells out of other cells and implanting them. For a while, we thought stem cells were this great magic bullet and we were gonna put them in an injury and they were gonna regrow everything. Turns out that doesn't work at all. Once again, I said, it's just not the same environment that you had when everything was growing in the first place. So if you stick a bunch of stem cells in a spinal cord, they're not gonna know what to do. For all we know, they could cause a big old tumor. So it's really tough. If I had to say, what is the closest thing on the horizon for patients who have, you know, brain damage, spinal cord damage? I think an Iron Man suit is much easier to make than to actually, at this point, completely heal a brain. So for example, if somebody is a tetraplegic and has lost control of all 4 limbs, it's closer in the future that we'll be able to record from the brain and be able to like mechanically move the rest of their body. So I think technology like that is growing at a much faster pace. But that certainly doesn't mean that neuroscience is failing. Neuroscience has a lot to do, but like Medina said, the brain is more complicated than space, right? So there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be sort of discovered, but we're getting there and we're getting closer. So that was my 3,000 word answer.
Yeah, and since we are on the topic, another big question that I think we can talk about for 1 hour just on this one, but let's see what our panelist has to say. Someone was asking which part of the brain is most important. Who wants to take this? Sarah, do you have an idea of which part is most important?
I think that really depends on what you consider important. I mean, certainly, you know, the brainstem, which controls all your autonomic functions, you can't really live without it. Whereas you can take off the entire cortex of, you know, an animal and they can survive just fine. But if you consider, you know, a sense of self important, then, you know, you really need the whole thing to some extent. So I think it's hard to say one region is more important than the other. But another thing to note is that the brain is very plastic. It's an organ that really can change a lot. And so, you know, when you remove a whole region, often the rest of the brain will try to take over its functions so that you don't lose a lot of function. So that's a long way to say, like, there's no most important region.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I would.
Does anybody have the correct answer or what?
No, I think I would just like to add to it that, you know, we can like how the evolution has taken place. The brain has also evolved from really, you know, simplistic neural system to really complex brain circuit that we have, right? And today the human brain has really specialized regions and they're all specialized to do different functions, right? We have these sensory regions that can sense, that can help us sense different sensory information that comes in. There are regions that are important for learning and memory, right? And then there are regions that are helping the other vital systems, like Sarah mentioned, to help us, you know, breathe or let our heart beat forever till we die. And so there are these specialized regions. So it's difficult to, you know, tell which is the most important. I think they're all equally important and important for our survival in one way or other.
Yeah, I think the evolutionary perspective is interesting, or another interesting dimension of important. If you compare us to rodents or sort of smaller animals before primates evolved, with their tool building abilities and eventually language and communication, the main differences are sort of up here. The other regions that Anand is mentioning that are handling your interaction with the environment and your motion and your movement through the world are more similar. And I think it's also interesting if you sort of divide up all the neuroscientists in the world and you say who's working on what, that's not necessarily in sync with our theories of what the most important parts of the brain are, because that's a higher order kind of harder question to answer. So we're sort of dividing it up, taking the small pieces.
Yeah, those are two different topics, right? What we should study and what we can study in the brain.
Right,
Because
exactly.
a lot of the brain regions are not accessible, and we are only able to study brain regions that are really, you know, organized in a certain way that we can understand and study.
So the correct answer was prefrontal cortex because it makes us human. Okay, next. So a lot of people, a lot of our parents, for example, have a lot of misconceptions about our job. The public has a lot of misconceptions about our job. You know, I remember in graduate school, we took neuroanatomy. Neuroanatomy, we took it with the med students. It was easily the most difficult class I've ever taken in my life. And as an answer to like, what is this class really for us? It was for when people don't understand who you are and they think you're a neurosurgeon. This is the class that's going to let you answer their questions about all the medical problems that they have. That really is something that we are not qualified for. To be clear, you know, like being a doctor, if you're a scientist, does not make us like at all ready for a hospital, right? You know, Eric, what are the common misconceptions about your job?
Well, I think probably everybody has this misconception that safety is kind of this, you know, go through the motions, boring kind of job. And I can see how people would.
How did you feel about that before you became the environmental health and safety officer, by the way?
Before I became the environmental health and safety officer, I thought that, you know, we're all adults. We should be able to make our own decisions. We know how to work safely within the lab. The safety guy was kind of like the police, and guy. He was coming to get me. And we all scattered like bugs when we heard his footsteps coming through the lab. We had his footsteps and cadence memorized, right? And we all had this weird response when he would come in to the lab, and we would look safe and hide all the non-safe items that we had out. But the way that I kind of approach the safety aspect of my job, which is pretty much all of it, I kind of make my presence in the lab as fun, I guess, as possible, so people don't get scared like bugs when I come in and run away from me. So I like to be kind of a common part of the lab setting and get into you know, into what people are doing. And because I have a science background, that's fun for me as well. So as far as back to the boring part of it, and whether it's boring or not, I get to learn a lot about what people are doing here at the Institute. I get to watch presentations, I get to talk to them in the lab, and that's very exciting for me to do.
So you want to break the misconception that you are the fun police?
I want to break the misconception that I am the fun police, yes.
Got it.
I want to, you know, I just want to have everybody on my side, and I want them all to do what I tell them to do. So they...
but both of those things.
Me too.
Yeah, we're all with you. Sarah, how about you? What are the misconceptions that you think people have about your line of work?
So I think surprisingly the biggest one is that everyone thinks that I'm aiming to cure a disease. So, you know, in my PhD, I would just tell people like, yeah, I'm trying to solve Alzheimer's, even though I wasn't really studying anything to do with Alzheimer's. And the same thing for my postdoc. You know, I tell my family, they're like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm trying to find a cure for obesity. But I think science actually is a lot more like art. You know, it's a very creative process, and not all of it, you know, of course, I think we all hope that the knowledge that we generate will eventually help better humankind, and often in terms of diseases. But a lot of it is just the endeavor to, create more knowledge in the world. And it doesn't necessarily directly translate towards curing a particular disease. Of course, some people do really want to do that, but that's not all that science can be.
I think Dr. Indira Raman really put that well. So she said that some of the research goes into curing ignorance.
It's a very good point, actually. And I agree there are a lot of misconceptions. And actually, when people come here to Max Planck, one misconception that we kind of debunk is like, I thought that science, you were all like serious and boring. You look like normal people. He's like, yeah, we are like normal.
Those are just the ones they see, though.
Yeah.
We put the others in the back.
That's a good point. Yeah. You see the funny one, like these are the funny ones. So our question that we get a lot from students, because another thing that can be also a misconception from the public is that they think we do an experiment and they always work. And so all the day we are like, yeah, I discovered this thing and I discovered this other thing. But actually, the reality is that most of what we do on a day-to-day basis in the lab is a failure. In the minute it doesn't work, and we have to figure it out why it doesn't work and to troubleshoot the experiment. So a question I have, especially for the postdocs in the panel, is how do you maintain your passion on a day-to-day basis when you have, especially when you have some failures on every day? Anand?
That's a great question. I think I would say that my passion stems from my curiosity. I'm in this field because I had some questions that I wanted answers that were not there, or some interesting phenomena that occurs in the nature. And so, my curiosity really, helps me to be passionate about the experiments that I do on a daily basis. And of course, there are a lot of times when there are failures. At the end of the day, even these failures remind me that the questions are still unanswered, and the observations that I made are still, I haven't really been able to explain them well. And so that keeps me going, or that keeps me, passionate about science and doing work every day.
Medina, what about you?
Well, I want to be honest that I do have bad days. Like my bad days aren't because an experiment failed in the sense that I couldn't complete it because the temperature in the room dropped and I had to stop, or some plan didn't work out, or I got the results but they were the opposite of what I expected. I get frustrated when I see a result and it doesn't make sense to me, and I can't understand it, and that's frustrating. And yeah, it'll ruin my mood for that day and I'll be kind of cranky. But what keeps me going is I've done this cycle enough to know, I mean, it's going to sound cliche, but if you persevere, if you keep doing the experiment, or if you keep sort of focused thought on this idea, and you read broader and wider and you keep at it, you're going to get there. And you go through that cycle enough that the failures don't mess with my mood or my day any less, but I bounce back up faster so that I can get to the next sort of gold nugget.
And
that feels really good. Yeah.
A lot of this seems to be very personality specific. There are people who can be great salesmen. They can go door to door and people can tell them no, and they can just like keep going and going. If you have that, you've got a scientist attitude, right? I was talking to this with Tal, one of the people that recently got a job to start his own lab from our institute. And so, we would talk about how he would do something for 2 weeks and then everything would fail because his work would be recording from live brain tissue. I mean, this is really tough stuff, and sometimes stuff doesn't work. And in biology, we don't always understand all the factors that lead to an experiment failing. Like Medina said, it could be the temperature in the room is off. It could be that the animal had a bad day. It could be that an electrode moved, something like that. And I was just like, oh God, I can never do this sort of in vivo work, because like if something doesn't work and I don't know why, it drives me up a wall. And he's like, no, I'm okay with it. I'll just do it again. It'll probably work the second time around, right? And if you have that, oh yeah,
Yeah, I'll say, like, I think once you experience the thrill of making a discovery and those like few minutes where you haven't told anyone yet and you realize like, wow, like I'm the only person in the world that knows this little piece of information. That is like, like months of failure can sustain me because I know like at the end I'll hopefully get that. And those like few minutes are just so exciting that it keeps you going.
You should just not tell anybody your results. That does sound like it feels good for a long time, you know?
Well, and it's funny, sometimes
You've been
you
hidden away
want
for
to
like a
share
week.
that moment. You want to share that like aha moment, but you need to like explain with the 10-minute startup. You know, like you can't just find somebody on the street. Even sometimes your lab mates, it's like, okay, I need you to sit down for a half hour because I need to explain this graph that I got, and I need you to understand with me why it's incredible. Yeah, but that's fun. I missed that during the pandemic, forcing people to sit down and look at my results.
So if we can like kind of continue on that, right? So there's a question from the audience of what are some tasks that seem small but are vital to an experiment's success? So Medina, do you have something for that?
God, all of it. I mean, this has been my biggest challenge in science, is that I'm not a patient person. I get distracted really easily. But science, the kind of science that I want to do, where the questions interest me and the experiments interest me, requires lots of patience and lots of focus. So I'm constantly battling this sort of internal, I want to get up and do things. So I would say every aspect of the experiment is challenging because it's trivial and it requires organization and planning and maintaining focus. So I'll give you an example. I do these experiments that sometimes last, into the night, 12 hours. And I need to plan them out so that I can make sure that I can sort of reproduce the conditions of the experiment. So that means that the day before, I need to sort of get in the right headspace and make sure that all my tools are the same, that all of the, I show videos on a TV monitor, that all of those videos are the same, that the distance of the monitor to the thing I'm recording from is the same, all of these trivial things, that the temperature of the room is the same because I use a laser to make my measurements, and if the temperature changes a lot or if the humidity changes a lot, the laser will move. So all of these sort of conditions to make sure, all of these controls to make sure your conditions are the same. But on the other end, also maintaining your focus throughout a long day can be challenging. So, I mean, I would say that to me, there's a lot of trivial, small things that are necessary in order to make sure an experiment goes well. And that is what distinguishes the creative aspects of science for me from actual art. I think art requires discipline like science does, but it doesn't require discipline on that small, careful time scale.
A lot of us learned this every little thing matters the hard way. For me and my PhD, so all the steps that Medina's describing that you take before sort of setting up to your experiment, this is all written out in something we call the protocol, right? It's the same thing that you're supposed to do. And a lot of the time this protocol wasn't written by you. You take somebody else's protocol and you recreate all the steps that they did. And you see like, all right, well, I'm supposed to take this old tube out of the fridge and leave it out for 2 minutes. I'll leave it out for 3 minutes today. I mean, that doesn't matter. I'm sure that's random. And then your experiments for 1 month fail and you're like, wow, I really should have paid attention to all the steps. Shortcuts don't work. So yeah, just to piggyback on that, like everything matters because there's not a lot of like waste in unnecessary steps in what we do.
Can I add a positive note to it? Oh, sorry.
Labeling.
I was just gonna say, like labeling, like there's so many things that we work with, so many samples, and at least when I started, I was like, oh, I have a decent memory, and I'm not like very organized by nature, so it's like I'll remember where I put that box.
It's like
samples.
Everybody's first day being like a waiter, I got this.
And then 3 months later, you're like, I have no idea what any of these tubes are. And then you have to do the same experiment over. And like you make that mistake a few times, and then you realize yeah, I better just spend the time and like label everything.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree. You think you are going to remember this little step or the condition, the concentration of the solution. I don't need to write it until you're like, oh, I thought I remember. No. And every little detail matter. I remember when I was doing olfactive learning experiments, they always say to never change your shampoo or whatever you're using, because even that can mess up with the experiment. So the level of how much you have to control the condition is a little bit crazy. And up until you don't do the experiment and it doesn't fail, you're like, oh, did I change my shampoo today? Then you don't know that. Anand, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to say that this, our work ethics have also changed over the years. All these factors that Madina has mentioned, like temperature, humidity, I would say time of the day when you do the experiments. Previously, people were doing whenever, right? But then they discovered with these inconsistencies that actually temperature is important when you record electrical currents, right? You have to maintain a particular temperature. Otherwise, you'll get invariable recordings, or the time of the day matters. The animal will learn better in one day versus the other. The humidity matters for the laser thing, right? And so over the period of years, the scientists have also made a much more consistent, work schedule based on these discoveries that were made because of inconsistencies before, right? And if you're careful, even with your inconsistencies, you can tell the difference in the observations that you make on daily basis.
Oh, and I want to point out, I think this is probably true for a lot of us, if not all of us. I'm like a drill sergeant at work. I'm extremely organized because I learned the hard way that I had to be. I had all these checklists. Everything is labeled. That's not how I am at home. I lost the registration for my car a couple of weeks ago. I got to get it back. I need to go to the dentist. Things are messy. I don't have any lists. I know, right? I know.
I can tell the same.
It's not it's a thing you build. You learn to build. So if you're a messy, disorganized person, that doesn't mean science isn't going to happen for you.
I can say the same for cooking, right? When I'm in the lab, I'm making solutions like measuring all milligram level accuracy, and then I come home, I can just put salt and spices in the dish whenever and however I want to.
So that's actually a fairly good transition to this other question that somebody had. So, if you weren't a scientist, is there some other career that you had in mind, some other dream, some sort of backup? So like, if we can start with Eric.
Another career that I had in mind, and it's not been from the beginning because I didn't have a traditional path, I guess, to get where I am now. So I'm ever changing in what I think the ideal career for me would be. Right now, because I'm really into fishing and I just bought a boat, I'm going to go with boat captain. I want to take people fishing out in the ocean. So I think that if my job was
going to stick around, are you going to retire and do that, do you think?
First, I think that there's going to be a little transition made as I get older. I think that I'll probably go into a career like teaching, where I get the summers off and then I can practice my boat captaining skills during the summer. And then once I get too old to put up with that's a bad thing, to put up with the kids and to teach the kids in school, I could just transition. I'll have my licensing and I can just become that boat captain full time. But I'll have to move out of my house because my family hates the smell of fish when I come back from fishing.
Medina, how about you?
Well, I guess my plan is to be a famous scientist. The backup is to be like a regular humble scientist.
Yeah, so the backup is one Nobel Prize, but the plan is 3 Nobel Prizes.
Right. No, I don't really have any backups because this is working out. But I guess like I could be a detective, because that's what I like about science. There's all this detective work, and there's so much good detective TV. They really do make it look fun. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of us had this point in grad school where like a bunch of experiments don't work and everything gets hard, and that's when like you find a job and you're just like, oh God, I could do this other thing tomorrow. You know, when I was in school, I was just like, I could start vegetarian food truck tomorrow. I could do it, you know? And it's always something completely nobody's like, well, if I only pivot from neuroscience to, you know, biology, then I'll be set, you know?
Yeah.
Just like food truck, no more science.
And talking about also future plan, another question that we get a lot from younger future scientists that want to go into this career, or that they are thinking about which college to apply, is like, is there any hot topic in science that you think it is a good idea to pursue to then have a job later on? What do you think, Sarah, since you are mentoring a lot of young undergraduates? What is your advice for young students that they like science, but they don't really know which topic might be a better bet for the future?
You know, that's a hard question, because I think in science, you really have to do what interests you, and that's what you'll be best at. So you definitely have to follow your interests, but I will say that I think that increasingly science, there's so much data that the computational tools are getting, you know, they're already really important. And, you know, I feel like I'm like the last generation that like didn't automatically have coding in like high school or even college.
No, they still don't do it. I teach them.
But yeah, so I think that is just extremely important. It's only going to become more necessary. So getting those skills, which don't automatically seem integral, will be really helpful no matter what scientific interests you have. I think you'll need those skills in the future.
I totally agree with that. Anand, do you have anything else to add? What do you think is going?
I think I had the same thing. I think we as humans are generating tons of data, and data is being generated in every sector of the society, be it climate, politics, healthcare, medicine, and all. We have come a long way to handle the data, to analyze the data, understand the data, to help us prepare for the future. But we still need a lot of work to be done in the data science. And so I think that's a really hot topic, and that's going to be hot for the next decade or so. The other thing that I think is really cool in science is looking for alternative fuel options, or understanding these renewable energy sources. I think Elon Musk has really shown us the direction that how we can make an electric car a success, a commercial success. And I think in the next decade, we would want to be more environmental friendly and want to look for some of these environmental friendlier options for fuels and energy.
And like, so this is one of those questions, you know, the what should I go into? So it's hot when I'm done being in school. It would have been a completely bad question, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, and I remember I was at a career panel listening to these people in industry talk, and you know, this student asked this question. She said, I'm finishing up my undergrad, thinking of going to a master's. What should I study? And all of them just get the scared face for this person. They're like, oh, please don't think this way, you know, because science is hard work, right? And like we talked about, there's a lot of failures, and if you are failing at something, the thing that's going to keep you going isn't the fact that you have a job where you've been hired to do it. The thing that's going to keep you going is you get really happy about your successes and you really love what you do. And so that is more important than anything. You know, find what you love one way or another. You will find a niche. You will be able to do it in a way that you like. However, that being said, this question was asked today and not 15 years ago. So the correct answer is also data science and machine learning and deep learning.
Totally agree. If we can take one last question that, again, can take a very long time to answer, but maybe someone can pick it up and give a quick answer. Someone asked, can you explain very quickly the basics of forming a memory? Who wants to take this?
As quickly as a short-term memory.
I'll take that. I mean, we actually know a lot about memory. The thing about how memories are formed and maintained is that you can look at it on multiple levels. So, you know, you can describe that without any biology, like from a psychological perspective. But I think the most, well, I guess I'll just speak from my own background, is that we know a lot about how memories are stabilized over time, right? So when you learn new information, you have what we call ensembles of neurons that sort of carry that information. And then it has to get stabilized over a period of time for that memory to be stored long term. And that period of stabilization is something we call consolidation. So that's just like a jargony term. And what it requires is transcription and translation. So, you know, your like standard that you learn in high school, like RNA to DNA to RNA to protein. So you need transcription of new genes in order to stabilize those memories over time. And if you disrupt that stabilization process, either with drugs, so you can use like protein synthesis inhibitors, or just like general interference from the environment can cause that process to not happen. And then those memories will not be formed. Does that cover it a little bit?
Yeah, and linked to that, another great question, and then we have to wrap it up. But someone asked, can we run out of space to store memory? Does someone have something to say about it? Should the student be scared to learn too much because they were going to run out of space?
Well, how big is their head? Because it all, you know.
I don't think you can run out of space. You know, we have, the beauty of the brain is that you can form like almost endless neural connections. But, you know, I'll say we as humans, our brains are designed to not maintain every memory, right? So we have mechanisms to decide what is important to maintain over time and what memories or learning that you've had is dispensable. And so you don't actually want to remember every single thing. And so we are designed to not remember every single thing.
So let's say we fix the body so that we all live to be 300 years. You're saying you would still have sort of 300 years worth of memory, but it would be spottier. Like you wouldn't remember so many childhood events. You'd remember.
It would be more efficient, right?
It would be more like the salient events. Or you would remember just from 200 to 300 years and nothing from earlier. I mean, these are two possibilities. We don't know.
Yeah.
I think I would also like to add in this. I think Sarah mentioned something in the previous question. We have different types of memory, right? We can't take memory as one general term. There are different types of memory. For example, we develop skills. For example, we know how to ride a bike, and that's a different type of memory than remembering what you did on your 15th birthday or your 18th birthday, right?
What if you rode a bike on your 15th birthday?
Huh?
And 18th birthday, both bike riding days. Total crossover.
But so there are different mechanisms of how these informations are processed and stored in the brain, right? And that's the beautiful part, like Sarah mentioned, that in spite of having limited number of cells in the brain, we still have the capacity to learn a new instrument when we are 60 years of age, to learn a new language when we are like really old, right? And so we have this infinite capacity. And one of the answers really lies into the connections that we have. Like you mentioned, that we have this capacity to make endless connections or modulate these connections that can help us remember or learn new information even when we are super old. But certain types of memory are more malleable and easier to form over the years than the others.
The last thing I'll say is that the beauty of this question is that, you know, we don't really know the answer. So anyone that wants to come help figure it out, then science is for you.
Yeah. And if you think that you have learned so much that you literally have no space for anything else, please also come and talk to us. We would love to hear that. So on that note, you know, I want to thank our speakers, and I want to close this out with a short little question for everybody. So what is the thing that you enjoy most about your job? So if we could start with Anant.
I would say experiments, experiments, and experiments. I think the core perk of being in this field is to do a lot of experiments that can help me to understand some of the observations that I made while learning, while studying, make some hypotheses to try to explain some of the observations, and then design more experiments. So I think that is a thing that I really enjoy the most. It's almost like meditation for me when I'm doing experiments in my dark room.
I think in our field of work, experiments is really just synonymous with work. So your answer was basically my favorite part of my job is the work, which I have to say means that you are in the right field, my friend. You know, that sounds awesome. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to say the opposite. You know, I actually don't enjoy doing experiments that much. I do them because they're necessary and I don't mind doing them most of the time. But my favorite part is actually the thinking. I just really enjoy thinking about what I want to learn that's not known and designing the experiments like that, how we can answer those questions. The actual doing to me is like a means to an end. So yeah, for me, it's more of the like thinking about science and, you know, sitting down and coming up with a hypothesis and figuring out how I'm going to go about answering that.
So since Sarah's new job is running a lab as opposed to working on one, this is a really great step for her. You're right, that's right. Finally there.
Another cool part about our job, I think that everyone might agree, is traveling, right? And traveling and communicating science, traveling to different conferences and meeting with new people from around the world, and you know, talking about our preliminary data and sharing our work, and then understanding or discovering what they have been doing and talking about it and discussing. I think that's also pretty awesome, where we can go to all these fancy places where the conferences happen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to when we can do that again in maybe 20 years.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
The vaccine is coming in November.
We don't want to time lock this episode that much. All right. So Eric, how about you? What is your favorite part about your job?
So my favorite part about my job is being able to, you know, venture around the institute and talk to all of the different scientists about their particular, discipline in science. So I don't have to know a lot about a particular discipline or a particular experiment that's going on, but I get to talk to a bunch of different people doing a bunch of different experiments, and, you know, wrap safety into those conversations, all right, without it really even seeming like safety. But I just get to take in all of this information. And then plus the institute is very small, so I'm not just limited to specific areas of safety. So I'm able to branch out as biological, chemical, fire, safety, and it just keeps going on and on. Pretty much anything you can put safety in front of, that I have to, you know, administer here at the Institute. So being able to fan out like that is pretty fun for me.
So you like having your fingers in all the pies. You get to know everything that's going on.
Yes.
Nice.
All right.
And Medina, how about you?
Yeah, what a great question. Somebody said that science is a creative endeavor, which I totally agree with. So I like the creative aspect of my work, but what I really mean by that is I feel like I really have to push myself. And that's what I mean by creativity. Like I have to push the boundaries of my thinking, and I'm sort of in a competition with myself. Or even when I'm doing experiments, I have to push myself to get into a place where my hands are steady, or to sort of build towards a technique that I can do really well that's critical to getting the sort of data that I need to test something. And that is constant. Like Sarah has arrived and she's a PI now, but she, just like us trainees, just like you guys, like science is a constant learning career. You constantly have to be pushing yourself. You constantly have to be learning new ideas and new tools. And you're sort of in this challenge with yourself. And I find that exciting and hard and tiring and fun all at the same time.
That's a fantastic answer.
All right. So I think that's a perfect place to close it off for us. So I want to thank you to Ilaria for organizing this whole thing. This was so usually we do like an in-person career panel for what is it, research day? What is it called?
Yes, every September we do it. So this is the first year that we had to come up with an alternative way, but I have to say I had a lot of fun talking with the scientists through Zoom, and I really hope that the students find it useful, and also the audience with the Neurotransmission podcast.
That's right, yeah.
We can do more of these episodes. Thank you so much for having us, Misha.
Yeah, and thank you so much to all of our panelists. You guys are really great and very helpful, and I'm sure a lot of people out there will appreciate the information that you had to share. We just want to plug before we go that we do, like we mentioned, we have internships, different positions at MPFI. So if you're interested in working with us, interning with us, whether you are high school, undergraduate, whatever level, go to mpfi.org, check internships. We list stuff.
Exactly.
And so with that said, once again, thank you to Ilaria and to all of our panelists, Medina, Sarah, Anant, and Eric. Please follow us. We are at MPF Neuro on Twitter. What are we on Instagram, Ilaria? At MPF Neuro, that's right. You could follow us on Facebook if you're into that sort of thing. And listen to our episodes. Okay. Bye.